and welcome to the Scrap and Stamp YouTube channel. Today we're going to be talking about mixing different inks all together on today's card. Today we're going to start with the Catherine Pooler Dogwoods in Bloom stamp set. We're going to start with a A2 sized card panel in our regular size Misty today. We're going to use Cotton Candy, which is a very light pink ink. And we've laid out one of the solid form stamps. And we're going to start with the solid forms because we're going to start with adding our base shapes first. So I've turned that card panel around and we're doing the other two images in the bottom opposite corner. So again, we're going with our Cotton Candy ink. We're going to make sure our magnet is in there to hold our paper down. And I like to do one layer of ink and then just see if it's smooth enough, and sometimes I go for two. There we go, we have our base color down. Next we're going to use a alcohol marker friendly ink, and we're going to stamp the outlines of each of our three flowers. So I'm positioning the outlines or the detail lined stamps from the stamp set here. And we're using Memento Tuxedo Black to make them nice and bold and beautiful. And as you can see, my stamping wasn't perfect, so I'm going to make sure that I do this a couple of times. I've flipped that card panel around again, and I'm just positioning that outline stamp onto that pink solid image, picking it up with the lid of my Misty, adding my Memento Tuxedo ink again, and making sure that all those lines are crisp and well stamped. One more layer of ink just in the center, just to make sure that that center of that bloom is all ready to go. Now we're going to add a little bit of detail, and we're going to use Copic Markers. So we're going to add kind of a medium tone first, blend it out with a lighter tone. We're using that RV04 as our medium tone. And we're going to use the RV02 to blend out that color. And because we've used such a light Catherine Pooler ink, and we've used a Copic Marker friendly black ink, I can actually go over both of these without ruining my markers. I decided it wasn't quite dark enough in that center, so I brought in a RV09. We're just going to add a little bit more flicking action from the centers of our magnolias, our dogwoods, just to add a little bit more depth into each of those flowers. So a couple of flicks, and that's the coloring of our flowers all complete. Now I've hand cut a mask out of masking paper of our bloom in the corner, and we're going to add some leaf details kind of hanging out from the background of our blooms. I'm going to use some tone-on-tone stamping. So we're going to use that Cotton Candy ink again to add our leaf details all in that background. It's going to be subtle and just lovely and pink to match those blooms. Your leaves don't always have to be the same color of ink as the outline of your blooms. You can definitely change it up and make them just a little bit more subtle, just like we're doing here. So I'm also pulled both of these leaf shapes from the stamp set, and I'm stamping them multiple times if needed for a nice crisp image. We've turned our panel around, and I'm going to add masks to the top two blooms, and we're going to stamp our leaves to appear like they have tucked themselves under those blooms. And again, we're going to use Cotton Candy ink for this. Really easy concept. There we go. Just making sure that my Cotton Candy ink is deep enough and dark enough to at least see in our background. I'm going to put that secondary mask on and reposition our leaf stamps again. And we're doing it all over again with our Cotton Candy ink. Just moving my magnet so it's going to hold down my paper a little bit closer to my stamp. Sometimes that helps with positioning. Give them a little wipe down, and we're going to reposition one more leaf here to peek out the other side of that dogwood. And this is our final leaf on our front panel. There we go. Now I've taken this to my splat box. I've got a little bit of black acrylic paint in a little paint pot. I'm just trying to get as many bristles on my black paint toothbrush here to make sure that I've got enough paint to add splatters to my card. Now when you use a paintbrush, you tend to get very, very fine splatter. And I like that detail because it's not super, it doesn't overwhelm the card. It just makes it kind of fine. And I wasn't worried about going over top my blooms. It was all fine. I've added the front panel, which I kind of trimmed down a little bit and added some black cardstock to the back for matting. We're going to add one of the sentiments, Love Always, with some gold embossing. So I've put my anti-static powder down. We're going to use Versamark ink to stamp our sentiment here. And I do it a couple of times just to make sure that I've got good coverage. And so we're going to take it out and we're going to add our gold detailed embossing powder. And because we put our anti-static powder down before we started to stamp, all of the extra particles from that embossing powder just flick off real easy. Make sure to preheat your heating tool. This allows for faster heating of your embossing powder, and it also makes for less warping of your paper. And voila, there it is, all stacked up on a A2 card front, and that's our card. Thanks, guys.